Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Rice University's Baker Institute for tonight's program on Track to Diplomacy in Israeli-Palestinian Negotiations. As many of you know, Israeli-Palestinian conflict transformation and conflict resolution is one of the key research programs we have here at the Baker Institute Center for the Middle East. We've recently released two substantive reports with policy recommendations for decision makers in this area. We brought them to Washington. The first is an assessment of U.S. public diplomacy strategy in support of a two-state solution entitled Changing Minds, Making Peace. We held a private roundtable discussion at the Brookings Institution with Martin Indyk on this report. He was Kerry's Middle East envoy, as you know, for the negotiations. Unfortunately, the failed negotiations. But at the Brookings Institution, we discussed this report during our most recent trip to Washington, and it was received favorably with firsthand knowledge of Secretary Kerry's recent peace initiative. The second report is a very informative discussion of the GCC states, the Gulf Cooperation Council states, and their role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict by our fellow Dr. Christian Ulrichsen. He's new to the Baker Institute. He's a brilliant scholar and expert on the Middle East, who analyzed the historical context and new opportunities for positive interaction between the Gulf states and Israel. Now, this work builds on our past research on the need for U.S. engagement in Israeli-Palestinian negotiations and the territorial component of peace. I would like to specifically mention our 2013 report entitled Re-engaging the Israelis and Palestinians, Why an American Role Initiating Negotiations is Necessary and How It Can Be Accomplished, which reached not only President Obama by our Baker Institute fellow, Palestinian fellow Samuel Abed, who works very closely with Yair Hirschfeld, our speaker tonight. At our March last year, when we published this report and we had an event here, Samuel Abed, our Baker Institute Palestinian fellow, called me and said he couldn't come. I said, why can't you come? He said, because he just got word that the White House, that President Obama is going to visit Ramallah, and that they're going to visit the Palestinian sports club that he's the president of. I said, excellent. Your whole reason in life is to hand him our report. And he handed the report to President Obama. President Obama very politely took it in his hand and handed it to an aide. But then Secretary Kerry spent 25 minutes with Sammy looking at the report and making notations in the columns. So I guess we're partially responsible for the failure of the talks. But anyway. But it also recently learned, I just got back from Europe and I'm a little jet lagged, but I was there at Berlin for the American Academy of Berlin that presented the Kissinger Prize to Secretary Baker for his work as Secretary of State. And in my short chat with Henry Kissinger in Berlin, he volunteered, he said, by the way, Ed, I read your report, this report I just mentioned, Re-engaging the Israelis and the Palestinians, in his Germanic accent, he said, I liked the report. It was a good report, but I don't agree with everything in it. Typical Kissinger. Our speaker tonight, Yair Hirschfeld, has been an instrumental part of all this work as the Baker Institute's Isaac and Mildred Brockstein Fellow in the Middle East Peace and Security, which is created in honor of the former Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Dr. Hirschfeld is particularly distinguished in the field of Track to Diplomacy, having created the Oslo Channel for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations way back in December 1992. He is largely the brains between the Oslo process. He headed the Israeli negotiating team on the unofficial track and then joined the official Israeli team from 1993 to 1995. This is the team that prepared the first permanent status agreement blueprint, the Balin-Abu Mazen Understanding. Yair has dedicated his whole professional life to Arab-Israeli peace and especially Israeli-Palestinian peace, and we're proud to have him as our our fellow here at the Institute, and we work very closely together with Yair. He is one of the founders and the current Director General of the Economic Cooperation Foundation, the ECF, a Tel Aviv-based NGO, which aims to develop a comprehensive strategy toward regional peacemaking and reconciliation by pursuing policy planning on permanent status issues and by supporting political, economic, and social cooperation. His new book, which you can buy outside after, Track to Diplomacy Toward an Israeli-Palestinian Solution, covers over 30 years of peacemaking attempts, including the successes and failures and the lessons, which is very important as we move forward, of the Oslo Accords. So it's my privilege to welcome him and his lovely wife, Ruthie, back to the Baker Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Yair Hirschfeld to our podium.
Many thanks, Ambassador Jedjian, for your wonderful words, and many thanks for you. It is an honor to be here and to talk to you this evening. I'll try to cover 3 or 4 or 5 issues. I'll give you a short description what Track 2 diplomacy is all about, what are the lessons, what are the major lessons learned in the past in the peacemaking process, what is the situation now, and where do we go from here. Now, if I'll start to tell you, I originally made my PhD on Iran, and this is an important part of the story because in February 1979, if you may remember, there was a small event in Iran, and a guy called Khomeini came to power. And I grew up in Vienna, and I was the head of the Iranian desk in Tel Aviv, but I was asked by the Austrian television to participate in a discussion on Iran, and the Austrian Prime Minister, Bundeskanzler, who was Jewish, saw me and asked to meet me. And I can assure you, if you're a young lecturer at the university and the Prime Minister from another country asks to see you, you go. And what then happened was, he was Jewish but anti-Zionist. I'm quite a patriotic Zionist. And we had complicated discussions, but I submitted to him a Track 2 concept, a strategic concept on promoting the Palestinian self-government by saying, let's work on the economic empowerment of the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. And Kreisky accepted it. I organized a Palestinian delegation to come to him, and he then went to King Hussein in Jordan and to Chairman Arafat, and I discussed it with Mr. Peres, and out of this developed a concept which led to the Schulz, Secretary of State Schulz's quality of life policy, but it also led to a close connection between Shimon Peres and myself, and Yossi Beilin. I would organize the secret meetings with the Palestinian leadership in the West Bank and Gaza throughout the 1980s. We would prepare what became the London Agreement in 1987. We would prepare the Baker proposals of 1989, the 5 Baker proposals. We would prepare in many ways, most, not all, of the Madrid Formula concept. And afterwards, I would prepare a paper which became the Oslo concept. They had the Oslo language, and the technique of negotiations we had developed throughout the 80s was that I would speak freely with the Palestinian leadership and then develop support from Peres and afterwards from the Israeli government. This is actually the Track 2 approach. The Track 2 approach means that non-officials have free access and flow of information to the leadership, that you understand that as a Track 2 activist, your own political opinion may be nice, but it is not decisive. You have the sense of humility that you know that you don't have responsibility, you don't have the legitimacy to take decisions, and you don't have the legitimacy to carry them out. So you have to find the zone of possible agreement between the stakeholders that are there. And the truth is that the Oslo negotiations, the work we did in the late 1970s and throughout the 1980s provided a network of relations with the Palestinian leadership, with the Israeli leadership, with the American, not always leadership, with the Egyptians, that you have a network of relations that you can check the positions of the different stakeholders, and you can go through a concept to develop where is the zone of possible agreement. I would tell you in an academic way that you need to go through a 6-point test, go through the narrative, develop a joint narrative, check how do you find common national interests, how you develop see how do you deal with the internal political situation, how you get the institutions like the IDF, the Mossad, or American Foreign Service on the Palestinian side, those actors on board, how you encourage the leadership to move ahead, and how do you learn lessons from earlier failures. And if you go through this 6-point test and you have a zone of possible agreement, you have a chance of being successful. Now, this is track to diplomacy. You have to be secret, you have to be under the screen, you have to give the credit to the leadership and not to yourself. So there are certain conditions that doesn't make it easy for fundraising, but make it very important if you really care about the subject and want to move forward. And we have 4 children, 8 grandchildren, and the 9th grandchild on the way. So we have an existential interest to make things happen, which also means that we are quite upset about some of American people, and I don't want to use names, but saying everything is down, nothing happens, nothing can be done. The understanding that it is everything or nothing is an understanding that you may have in the United States if you live in Israel, if you live in Palestine. This is not the situation. It is either we can find a way to live together and we don't have to have all solutions. And you have to understand that peace is not a paper, and I'm quoting Jonathan Powell by saying this: peace is not a paper which you sign and you get the Nobel Prize for it, or there is a solution, but peace is a process when warring parties gradually find trust with each other. And what we're actually working on is trying to find trust with each other. This is the main essence of Track 2 diplomacy. Now let me go to major lessons learned and how we move ahead. I'll tell you 2 stories on the major lesson learned. It is the major lesson learned. And the first story is a story about our Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, who, after we concluded the Declaration of Principles, which was signed on the White House lawn, there were further negotiations, and the negotiators, which wasn't me, the negotiators complained that Rabin didn't give them a clear strategic outside. He didn't say, this is the solution I want to have. But there's a story which I researched in the book, and it's in the book, where Danny Rothschild, who was in charge of speaking to the Palestinians, had to prepare for Rabin a meeting with Arafat at Erez at the border between Israel and Gaza. And Rabin asked that he should prepare him good confidence-building measures. And Danny Rothschild prepared 20 such measures for Rabin and said, give him 6, wait what his reaction is. If his reaction is positive, give him another 6, and then keep another 8 of the 20 for the next meeting. Rabin goes to the meeting, goes up in the first floor. Danny Rothschild stays downstairs. After 7-8 minutes, he calls Danny Rothschild. Danny Rothschild sits beside him and he says, Danny, I gave him all the 20 confidence-building measures. Give me some more. Rabin understood something very essential. He understood that peacemaking is about confidence building, it's creating a partnership, it's creating an understanding between the major actors that have to go along and find confidence to each other, build trust on a very difficult process, and understand what the political constraints of each side are. And accordingly, he didn't give clear measures. What is the final solution, which we already had once, of the outcome? It is not a total solution of Jerusalem, not a total Jerusalem refugees, but it is an understanding how, under political constraints that both leaders have, can you move ahead in a confidence-building activity. And I'll tell you a second story, which is very painful for me and makes it more difficult. The second story is that we did work, as Ambassador Jerijan says, we did work on a permanent status agreement with a full solution of all outstanding issues on a track 2 basis, without the legitimacy, without the responsibility of carrying it out. And it turns out, when I made my research on the book, that 2 months before we concluded the Beilin-Abu Mazen understanding, there was a meeting between Arafat and Yossi Beilin, and independently a meeting between Arafat and me. And Arafat told me, and he separately told Yossi Beilin, don't go for a complete agreement. It will not work. The gap is too big. It will make life difficult between you and Rabin and Peres. Don't go for it. And we disrespected it. We disrespected it, and we created, and I must say, if I regret anything in my 30 years of activity, we created a situation where President Clinton, Secretary of State Kerry, also Prime Minister Olmert, in a more serious manner, believe there is a permanent solution, that you can solve all outstanding issues in one thing, not understanding that we have to build confidence and understandings on the way. And I'll put this to you in more theoretical terms. If you look at the book starts in 1978. It doesn't coincidentally start in 1978, because 1978 is on the 17th of September of 78, our government, the government of the United States and Egypt, signed the Camp David Accords. And the Camp David Accords created a blueprint for Israeli-Palestinian peace, or for a wider comprehensive Israeli-Arab peace. And the Israeli-Palestinian peace was built on 3 phases: on negotiations for an interim government, which is which we got in Oslo, which is the Palestinian self-government. Then, second phase, you go to solve the outstanding issues of conflict: Jerusalem, security, refugees, settlements, territory, finality of claims, end of conflict, the nature of the state. And then you go for a 2-state solution. This paradigm is a paradigm that we've tried 4 or 5 times, and it has failed 4 or 5 times. And it is insanity, according to Einstein, to repeat something that has failed again and again and again. The real paradigm of building confidence between the 2 nations, the Jewish nations in Israel and its Arab citizens, and the Palestinian nation, the 2 paradigm is to work on strengthening the Palestinian Authority, work on building a functioning 2-state structure and building the basis for a functioning Palestinian state, and then go for solving the outstanding issues. And the truth is that if you look from the Israeli side at the equation, the understanding that you could have a paper that will solve all these outstanding issues, Jerusalem refugees and all of these issues, and you would then get a failed state because you will not have the capacities on the Palestinian side to do that, would be a disaster for Israel, because it will break down, it will cause more terror, more lack of confidence, and more disaster. So if there's one major lesson learned, is let's change the paradigm and move seriously to a serious state-building activity. Now, on state building, let me also say that anyone who said that Oslo failed, I can write a lot of footnotes why there were failures at Oslo. But Oslo, in many issues, has succeeded, and I'll tell you on what. The first success is that the outside leadership of the PLO is now the inside leadership of the Palestinian leadership. The interest of the Palestinian leadership is to bring about end of occupation and establish a functioning, successful, prosperous, and stable and democratic Palestinian state. This has to live together with Israel and has to find, as the major interest is to find good neighborly relations with us. And there's been a lot of ups and downs, but there has been major success. And I'll tell you where the major success is. In 2007, on the basis of Track 2 activity, with the help of General Jones and General Keith Dayton, but with the leadership of the Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad, the Palestinian Authority created a monopoly of authority and changed the terror structure that were before under Arafat. There were 10 different security organizations, each with its fiefdom, and created an orderly chain of command, and we created a functioning security corporation. The security corporation was defined by our Chief of Staff, Gabi Ashkenazi. They do more, we do less. The former, occupation doesn't work. Getting out of Gaza unilaterally and leaving a total vacuum doesn't work, but coordination of security cooperation does work as long as it goes together with a process of leading to a two-state solution and moving to the end of occupation. Now we have in many ways the tools, the understanding how to move ahead on this process. Now let me take you to the present situation. Doesn't mean that everybody in the Israeli system and everybody in the Palestinian system want that. It doesn't mean that there are not spoilers on all sides, and there are not people with best intentions that act as spoilers unintentionally. But it does mean that we have today a very complex situation, which is the outcome of the war in Gaza. We have had 55 days, not 51, but 55 days of war, which the first 4 days Hamas attacked us, and we did not react because the Egyptians negotiated a ceasefire, which we kept for the first 4 days. But then, after the ongoing provocation, we did react, and the 51 days of war started. But the present situation in the Middle East has created a strategic reality that goes in line with the Chinese saying, a definition of a crisis. It is a big danger and a big opportunity. Let me talk about the opportunity before I come to the danger. And Ambassador Jrijan in his book speaks a lot about dangers and opportunities. Now, on the opportunity is there are 6 major actors in the Middle East who are pro-American, have a vested interest in the Middle East and stability. This is Egypt, this is the Palestinian Authority, this is Jordan, this is Saudi Arabia, this is United Arab Emirates, and this is Israel. If we want to prevent Hamas from rearming, it is an essential interest of the government of Israel to work closely together with Egypt, closely together with the Palestinian Authority, closely together with Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. And we are surrounded, all of us, by a ring of terrorists, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran. It was Qatar and Turkey being part of the warmongers and the supporters of terrorism. Now, Qatar is moving in the right direction with the help of the United States. Turkey is also moving in the right direction, but there is a common interest to stabilize the situation now against the terror of Daesh, of ISIS, the terrorist groups, Al-Qaeda, Jabhat al-Nusra, and all these groups. And if we don't hang together, actually we hang, each of us will hang quite separately. Now, it creates the need, and there's been some headway in this. We have the headway was that you have only yesterday there have been $5.4 billion pledged for the reconstruction of Gaza via the Palestinian Authority. The meeting was in Egypt to show the centrality of the Egyptian government in stabilizing the situation, working together with Israel to prevent the rearming of Hamas. There is a Palestinian consensus or unity government who have gone to the Palestinian leadership have gone to Gaza with the okay and the agreement of the Israeli government. There is on the ground, there are certain activities that make it clear that the security interest of Israel, the Palestinian Authority, Egypt, works all together. Now, we will tell you that it is impossible to sustain this joint security cooperation if there's not headway in the peace process. On the peace process itself, if we don't go for the impossible, but we go for the possible along the lines that Rabin and Arafat pointed out to me before that, we have a real chance of moving ahead. On the strategic security thing, you have to understand the reality that Rabin explained to our rabbis in 1919, that the security reality then in 1990 and today even more, was that you have to understand the security reality in 3 geographic circles. In the inner circle, the West Bank and Gaza, which Rabin said is not his task, but is more technical task how to handle. The Israeli interest is to develop security cooperation on the 2nd circle with Egypt, with Jordan, with Saudi Arabia, possibly with Turkey, at that time with Syria too. Well, the 3rd circle, Iran, at that time Iraq, Pakistan, the Americans don't need. And Rabin told the rabbis in 1990, in order to take care of the security of Israel, we have to make concessions on the West Bank and Gaza. If you make concessions on the West Bank and Gaza, it means that I can maintain security cooperation on the 2nd circle with Egypt, with Jordan, with today with the PA and with the others. And it means that the United States can take care of its own national security and Israel's national security in the wider circle with Iran, Pakistan, and in these areas. And this was true in 1990, this is true today more than ever. Now, there is an opportunity to move ahead. We have understandings, and in fact 2 understandings. We speak to the people outside the political pressure that is there, and there is an opportunity that we have to use. There is a big danger, and the danger is that business as usual, that the political realities in the Middle East, the weakness of President Abbas, the political coalitions within the Israeli system easily can push the Israeli and Palestinian leadership to polarize one against the other. And if you look at the speeches of Chairman Abbas or President Abbas and of our Prime Minister at the United Nations, you see that there is seemingly the political need to polarize one against the other. There's the danger that the Palestinian Authority will break down and its power will be eroded over time, either quickly or slowly or gradually, which will lead to a total anarchic situation in Gaza and in the West Bank. And then national security of Israel, the national security of the United States, and then actually the basic interests of Egypt, of Jordan, of the Palestinians would be quite endangered. So the truth is that we don't have an easy situation. The truth is that we have big challenges ahead. But the truth is that the experience that we have, that the network relations we have, the need to prevent a disaster is strong enough to get the necessary determination, the necessary work together in order to move forward. Thank you.
Questions are welcome from the audience. Yair, I'm going to let you just point your finger. You'll be more objective than I am.
Please.
But please, no speeches, questions.
I want to thank you for your words. I learned a lot. I wanted to get your take on Netanyahu, and if you think that he is serious about peace and about a two-state solution. In the West, I tend to feel as if he's not really that serious about peace and enduring peace in the Middle East, Israel and Palestine.
I'll give you an honest answer. I don't know. And worse, I don't think he knows. I'll tell you what we believe and we understand his thinking is, and the conundrum he's in. From discussions other people had with him, not me, he understands the logic of a two-state solution. He understands that the demographics in the Middle East make it necessary, if we want to have Israel as the state where the Jewish people exercise their right to implement the right to self-determination, we have to have a two-state solution. And for the security of Israel, he understands that we need a two-state solution. So he's not far away from there. Now politically, he's in a real conundrum. Politically, in order to move forward, Sharon had to break his party in two and had to split his party. I can tell you that Netanyahu had, before the Gaza war, intended to split Likud and to move ahead. But it's not easy. If he moves ahead on the way to end of occupation, he won't use my language. He has to build a coalition where he will be the minority in his own government. This is the Israeli system. He'll have to work with the Labour Party, he'll work with Shas, who have turned to the peace camp, he'll work with Kahlon, he'll work with all those who are for a more moderate policy. And in this constellation, he has now 20 mandates. In order to have a majority with this group, he will be in a minority, which is not easy for a prime minister to do, because he can always be kicked out, and he doesn't have control whenever the other parties will go for elections at conditions that will not be easy for him. I believe, and we've discussed this in some detail, I believe that a clever dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians, a clever American policy, which is not over-eager and doesn't shoot too high, doesn't shoot too low, can create the necessarily constructive dilemmas for Netanyahu to move ahead in strengthening it. And I can tell you the three periods we need. We need now, the first period is to strengthen the Palestinian Authority. Netanyahu is not on the verbal level, on the practical level, things are happening, not enough, but there's some more happening. Netanyahu is also good in improving relations with Egypt, improving relations with Jordan, which is part of the stabilizing the structure, and this is doing not a bad job. But we have to strengthen the PA in the coming months. It's a major essential interest of all of us, and the security structure is all in favor. Then we have to prepare for elections. There will be elections in Israel at about December 2015, and it is important to move forward with an understanding what peace can be done after these elections. And elections in Israel will have to be on the peace process. And you have a determination among some of the political leadership who are strong enough to enforce this, that the elections will be on the peace process. And then Netanyahu can decide that what way he goes, and I hope he will go the right way. I think he will go it too. If it is politically useful, he definitely would do it. Please.
So you in following this line of thought, suppose that Netanyahu is pushed towards a two-state solution, and given what you said earlier, that Abbas is a weak leader inside the Palestinian Authority, how would Abbas be able, how strong would Abbas be in being able to correspond to this advance from Netanyahu's side towards a two-state solution? What are the forces that would go against Abbas?
I tell you what, the situation is changing almost daily. You had 3 or 4 weeks ago, You had a situation where 60% of the Palestinian people would have voted for Hamas, for Haniyeh as leaders, and only 30% for Abbas. Now, all the political cards for the reconstruction of Gaza with Abbas, not with Hamas. He has the support of the international community, he has the support of Egypt, he has the support of most Arab countries. If you want to implement the demands of Hamas on Gaza, the Hamas has to accept the leadership of Abbas and it has to be clear that he can bring about the reconstruction of Gaza and not the Hamas. That strengthens him. And even his polarizing activities have strengthened him inside. In order for Abbas to move ahead, he needs the legitimacy of the Arab League and the Arab countries. The Egyptian President Assisi has already said publicly, the last 2 days, by the way, the Egyptians told us 2 months ago, that they will demand from the Israeli government a reference to the Arab Peace Initiative. That what the Arab Peace Initiative is a concept. There are some principles there, but it doesn't say that they should negotiate instead of the others. So the Palestinians would have to negotiate, and if he negotiates under the Arab cover, he has a far bigger legitimacy to move ahead. It's complicated. It's not easy because how far is there common ground on that? We argue towards the Palestinians that in order the Ambassador Giorgiani in his opening phrase used two terms, and one is essential. There are 3 terms actually. There's conflict resolution, but there's conflict transformation. We are telling the Palestinians, don't go for conflict resolution now. Let's go for conflict transformation. We have to build a social capital and trust each other in order to move forward. We have very clear, detailed ideas. There is understandings on water, there's understandings in infrastructure, there's understanding on Palestinian state building, there's understandings on security that we all can achieve to move forward. We have no question that if there's a serious breakthrough on these issues, and it is not everything or nothing, and then it's only nothing, if there's substantial headway on the ground, if there's a substantial improvement, if the Palestinians can bring to the West Bank Arab investment, Palestinian investment of $6-8 billion, there can be major projects that go beyond Area B and Area A and B. It would enormously strengthen the PA. So we think we have the means to do that. One more sentence. The difficulty for Israel to do is how does this put an end to delegitimization of Israel, and what is the quid pro quo on these issues? I'm sorry.
I was wondering, what is your approach to solving this conundrum where the Abbas has the support of Egypt, support of Jordan, Saudi, and all these outside bodies, but 60% of his own people will support Hamas. So how do we go about that? At one point, there must be free elections there. And with Hamas taking hold of the West Bank, we have nobody to talk to.
Elections is an American invention.
I know that. I know that.
And the elections.
I was against the
And the elections in 2006 were an American invention, and we try to tell the Americans this is nonsense. The situation is not static, not in Israel, not in the Palestinian areas. And you've got today, the Palestinian society is what we call academically a neo-patrimonial society. You vote for who makes things better for you. Now, Abbas will make things better, Hamas will not make things better for them. So obviously, now the situation, the Palestinian concept, and your heading is legitimate, is justified, is that the Palestinians believe that because there was 51 days of struggle against us, military work has caused the Israeli government to concessions. The difficulty is that the Israeli government has to make concessions to those who don't break war, but to those others. This is not exactly what has been in the past all the time, and we've made mistakes on that. But it's a matter of political management, and I'll tell you, if there's a total answer, absolute answer, there's no total answer, but there's you build a structure that supports it. With Salam Fayyad, we went quite a lot ahead. Salam Fayyad wanted then to do state building unilaterally, not in a dialogue with Israel. We have today Abbas and Dr. Muhammad Mustafa, who says we have to do this in an understanding with Israel. We'll have Meir Dagan here in 2 days who will tell you you don't have to have an agreement signed, you can have these understandings. And you've got Secretary of State Schultz who will tell you have no idea what you can do without signing agreements, but actually moving forward. So there's a lot of things that we can do. Please.
There are those who say among the Palestinians that the problem is not just the political leadership in Mr. Abbas, but the problem is in the Palestinian Authority itself. Their position is, among the Palestinians, that it was created by international authority and was simply thrust upon the Palestinian people. So there's some question about whether or not he has the political support to cut any type of a regional deal with the State of Israel. And then on the other hand, as a complementary issue, you've got the situation of Hamas, which has never embraced or accepted the legitimacy of the Oslo peace accords. Consequently, they are rejecting the very legal foundations for the existence of the Palestinian Authority. And so consequently with this unity government, Mr. Abbas has been put in a position where he cannot deliver peace without losing credibility with his own people. And then on the Hamas side, their very existence arises out of a state of permanent warfare with Israel. I'd like to hear your comments, sir.
I think what you describe is very accurate. Very accurate. And if I listen to you, to my understanding, I don't know if it's your understanding, you sustain my argument. Because what is my basic argument? My basic argument, don't go for a full agreement. So if you, if we want, for instance, the recognition, I can go far more into detail, but don't go for a full agreement. On all the permanent status issue, Abbas represents 1/4 of the Palestinian people. Abbas represents the people in the West Bank and Gaza. He doesn't represent Israeli Palestinians. He doesn't represent the Palestinians in the Arab countries, and he doesn't represent the Palestinians in the diaspora. If he gives up the right of return, the Palestinians in the diaspora go wild against him. If he recognizes, which he already did, Israel is the state of the Jewish people, the Israeli Palestinians go against him. If he does something on Jerusalem, the Palestinians in the Arab countries go against him. So there's a big difficulty for him to move totally on all the permanent status issues. What I'm saying is, you need some kind of cover. If you read the report we wrote in 2013, we said let's agree on what we can, let's implement what we can agree upon, and have some cover to cover up on some of the permanent status issues without actually going there, which the United States could have given if Kerry wouldn't have turned it around upside down. But it's not only that he got the report, but he, instead of reading it from the beginning to the end, turned it around. Which we could have, anyway, don't want to go into that. But what I'm saying is, let's develop the state capacities of the Palestinian Authority. Let's give them more control of, more administrative control. Let's develop the institutions. Let's expand their economic activities, infrastructure development, strong beyond Area A and Area B, also into Area C, which is 60% of the West Bank. Let's increase their security capacities, their police capacities. Let them give them the instruments, the tools to develop a functioning state. If they get the tools to develop a functioning state, it answers all your arguments. It answers the arguments that they will serve their population. They will serve their population, give them and give them the services the population need from a state. The state has functions. It will implement the state functions and not only be a group of elitist guys. It will show that Hamas is not getting anything out of the war. And it will exclude, it will neutralize those outside players who make it so difficult to reach what you say. So from my point of view, you sustain my argument very clearly. Can I go to, no, please, in the front.
In your opinion, what should be the role of the American administration in view of what happened 2 days ago in Cairo? Especially, I don't know if you heard today, the spokesman Abu Mazen made a statement in Cairo that the lack of proactive policy by Kerry rendered the Americans as irrelevant to the next step, and it forced the Palestinians to go to the UN and to the international community. What is the role of the American administration in jump-starting whatever it is going to be done?
I have very strong ideas on that, so I'll try to be soft. I'll tell you, when I negotiated in Oslo, the Americans didn't undermine our effort. They were not in the room, and we had an understanding. Then we went to the Americans, and then they supported us. Then they gave us the supportive structure, they gave the coalition, they did afterwards a wonderful job, after we had the basic understandings. I can tell you that a chief negotiator, somebody who's very much in the negotiations today, came to me, and I won't use his name also, you will be able to guess whom I'm speaking about, told me, Yair, I envy you. When we were in the negotiations, the Americans were all the time in the room, and it was a disaster. If the Americans are in the room, the Palestinians speak to the Americans, they don't speak to us. If the Americans in the room, the Palestinians don't understand that they have to come to terms with us, they believe they have to come to terms with the Americans, and then they do it according to thinking in Washington that has nothing or very little to do with thinking in the Middle East. So I'm sorry that I'm very clear on that. Now, that doesn't mean that the United States has not a major role to play. It has it has to give the regional and structural support for both sides to move ahead. Abu Mazen needs legitimacy, we need security, and the United States can provide. If it doesn't negotiate, they don't want to negotiate a ceasefire with Qatar and with Turkey without the Palestinians, without the Israelis, and without the Egyptians, which is the most outrageous thing to do. If it doesn't do these kind of things, but speaks to the people who are involved in it, then the United States does create a support. Now, going to Egypt, having the conference in Egypt on the last 2 days is a major positive move. Telling the Qataris to behave like human beings and not by warmongering guys who have undermined the ceasefire that we had on August 19 and have called other Palestinians and Israelis to be killed. All of this is very important. And now the United States is doing a relatively very good job on that. Now, the basic lesson I've learned at the beginning of my activity in 1982-83 already was that the Bethlehem mayor told me, Yair, before you talk, first listen. So I think this is also true for the United States. The United States didn't always only listen, they talked before they listened, and now they're more insecure. They want to listen. Now, one more thing. If you look at the agreement between Hamas and the PA, the agreement is that Hamas will not take military action whatsoever, and without okay from the PA, which they will not get, and President Abbas will not create an initiative without the okay of Hamas. So my sense is that we can create a structure to move ahead, not necessarily with a new American initiative, but with understandings that emerge from the area and are supported from Washington, not the other way around. This young man, and then I'll come here.
Like you said, the agreement and solution does not come from the deciding of
A little bit louder.
Do you think the Israeli population is ready for such an agreement? Do you think enough is being done socially and educationally to prepare the population, especially the younger generation, for such solutions?
My sense is, my reading of the map, and I may be right or wrong, is that the Gaza war has created the bifurcation in Israel. That you have the very right wing saying we have to conquer Gaza, we have to control everything, and we have to follow we have to disregard Napoleon's advice that you can do everything with bayonets, but it's not nice to sit on them. They say, Nu letzal lenatzeach, let's the IDF win. This is one group. And you have the other group that is saying we need a peace process. We need a peace process. It's going to be a struggle in the next elections, and towards the next elections, which of the two things will happen. The old business as usual, that you negotiate but you don't negotiate and you don't do anything, I don't think will work anymore. Please.
Going back to 1993, could you talk a little bit about the transition from you and Ron Bundak to Uri Savir and Yoel Singer and Yossi Balin of the principal negotiating role?
Not sure if I want to talk about it. You must understand, and the book shows that from my point of view, the Oslo negotiations didn't start on December 4, 1902, but they started in 1979. And Ron wasn't part of it. Ron didn't know what this book is. If you understand the Oslo negotiations only from December 1902 on, you don't understand the process. We were looking for the basic understanding leading the work I did was Israel, in order to survive, needs to have legitimate and good relations with its neighbors. And we tried different options and we failed on different options. I can tell you why Rabin decided to go and negotiate, give us the backing to negotiate with the PLO. It says in the book, maybe I'll give it because it's it's juicy. He had three major experiences, and I describe it in the book. The first experience was that he went to speak to Israeli soldiers who were fighting the Intifada, and they were all very excited and supportive, but he felt something wasn't okay. So he gave the order to look at the letter. There's a censorship in Israel for for soldiers everywhere. And he gave the order to read the letters of the soldiers, of the Miluimika,
Reserve.
The reserve. And they wrote, well, why are we running after children and beating children? This is police work. Why are we doing this? So it was his first experience. His second experience was that he went to the prisoners' camp, and I got the story from the Palestinian side too, and there were two Palestinian leaders sitting and peeling potatoes. And he sat beside them, and Eitan Haber, who told me the story, said, I was afraid they would use the knife against Rabin, but they didn't. And they told him, you can put 80,000, 100,000 people in prison. If you don't go to Tunis, nothing will happen. So we will go. So he had an understanding, I have to do something. And the third experience was that in order to build an understanding how to work with the Palestinians, he, for 5 or 6 months, invited Palestinian leaders, every week 10 Palestinian leaders to speak to them. And discussed it when, how do you move forward? And we spoke maybe to 100, 120, very, the social leadership, the political leadership in the West Bank and Gaza. And afterwards, the intelligence told him that each of those 120 people who he talked to wrote a report to Tunis to ask for instructions what to do. So these three experiences made it clear for him that Rabin understood we have to go to. So what I'm telling you is that the transition from seemingly Ron Pundak and me, we were not out in the forest and we were not detached in reality from it. We were part of an historical process. It was in January 1993 that in the meeting of the two were Peres and Rabin, Peres asked Rabin, if there are negotiations on self-government, when do we propose to Arafat to come back to Gaza? I was given at the third meeting in Norway the order to ask Abu Allah, when does Arafat come back to Gaza? This was a major change in Israeli thinking. This wasn't Yair Hirschfeld, with all due respect. Rabin got the Peace Prize and not me, and justifiedly, with full justification. So the transition from what we did to what happened afterwards was all the thinking of Rabin. Now, there were things that I wanted to do that didn't happen. There is competition. If you ask me how much I thought that Uri Savir was a wonderful colleague, you won't get the answer from me. His competition to see that somebody else would achieve something and not him was not acceptable to him. So he would do everything to undercut us. And he undercut us in a way which I don't want to tell you. So you have these competitions, you have human relations that are complicated afterwards. Now, the major difference which I feel appalled about, and it wasn't my fault, is in Oslo there was Annex 3 and Annex 4 which I wrote. If you look at the Declaration of Principles, there's Annex 3 and Annex 4, and it was extremely proud that Rabin didn't correct one word. There was not one word. He left it as it was. And I didn't understand that he didn't care about it. Now, Annex 3 and Annex 4 were essential for the success of the Oslo Bank. I understood something that if you had in the Intifada from 1997 to 1993, you had the Israeli pyramid and the Palestinian pyramid, and the top understood they have to talk to each other, but the violence and the resentment pushed the bottom of the pyramid against each other. And therefore, I understood that Annex 3 and Annex 4 meant that you have to cooperate together. You have to find ways of cooperation, of building social capital between each side on all kind of media cooperation, economic cooperation, financial, water, infrastructure, energy, on all of these issues, which is all there. And Rabin didn't give a damn for it, which was a pity. So if there was one part, the transition made sense. But this part of the transition was lacking, which I tried to change, but I wasn't capable. That's on the transition.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Yair Hirschfeld.